I'm Forrest McFreelova, and this is Speedplay France and Hearts of Iron 4, number 1. We are going to first of all go ahead and just get all of our production set up, build as many civilian factories as we can for a little while, get our military technologies, well not technologies, probably go ahead and build just small light armored units. Really probably just organize all of our forces into 2 to 3 groups, or at least on the mainland. The first group is going to be just all of our infantry, and not any of our mountain infantry or any specialty units like that. It'll just be all of our basic frontline infantry that's going to be more or less just a human wall, a hopefully more reactive human wall that will maintain most of our border forces. Our mountain units are going to move over to the Italian border, and that saves all of our rapid response units, all of our motorized, all of our armored, all of our cavalry. We're just going to move that into its own separate unit, and that will be the unit that we really focus on. We're also going to attempt to turn ourselves fascist, because the objective for this campaign is that we, the French, and the French alone, are going to become the only country in the world. This is, by necessity, a world conquest campaign. We're going to be the only country in the world by the end of this if we succeed. I picked France instead of anywhere else because, well, we already did one as Germany. The Soviet Union is kind of boring, and I think also as puppets. I know that's probably really harsh to say that the Soviets are kind of boring. I just don't quite imagine that the Germans will be able to pull off a successful invasion of the Soviet Union, and then at that point it's just kind of a slower build-up to the same old thing. Anyway though, so we're going to go ahead and we get a bunch of events for communist support. We could very well have just become a communist France, which I believe would have been something like the French Commune. However, fascism allows us to just declare wars relatively quickly. People had suggested countries, say maybe Turkey or whatnot. My only fear with a country such as Turkey is that the industrial capacity and just capabilities of that country might be too low to realistically take on the world. And quite frankly, I am hoping for somewhat of a short campaign as we do this. So our main objective is just going to be to foster support for fascism, hopefully get the fascists to take over our country, and from there just try to see what we can get as we move forward to conquer the world. I think a very significant thing that's going to hamstring us is going to be our manpower, as we do have a very, very low amount of manpower just beginning just in the first place. So that's going to be something we really have to work on, probably just through really advanced field hospitals and things like that. We also do have pretty low industrial capacity compared to places like Germany. Right now we're just getting all of our navy together into 2 distinct clumps, or at least that's going to be the end goal. One, just our surface navy is going to be its own clump, and then our submarine fleet will be its own clump. And we're just going to focus on really dominating 1 or 2 naval areas at a time. Now, hopefully we can avoid going to war with Britain until we have subjugated most of Central Europe, although that is looking very, very far ahead. Right now we're just reorganizing our military forces, really just getting rid of all of the AI set groups, except with our Air Force, which is on our carrier in the Mediterranean. We're just going to leave that bit of our Air Force. Everything else will just be rebuilt. Our industry is pretty lackluster. We're going to have to focus on the industrial and research tech tree in the near-ish future, but it is more important that we focus on getting fascist support up, which you'll notice is slowly building. And since it is just the pre-war years, that is really going to be the main thing going on. We managed to get it so that we get plus 0.3 fascist support per day, just as all of the modifiers come in. So that should be a decent amount that'll get us, moving forward pretty swiftly. We do have the option to maybe try to befriend Italy or befriend Germany. If we befriend Germany, then that would just be pretty boring. All that we would really do is then use the combined strength of Germany and France to conquer the world. Our last campaign saw us do that as Germany, just with the Axis. So we'd basically we would be becoming a junior partner in a faction for no real reason. We're French. We should dominate the world, is kind of a stereotypical French sort of proud attitude to have. We could ally the Italians, which would give us a great boon to defeating the German Reich in the very initial phases of the war. And that would be good. It would make it a lot easier. The only issue is, if we go down that route, then we can't do a world conquest. So what we'll probably do is not limit ourselves by declaring war on Italy or any such thing, just not reach out to them for an alliance. If it turns out that we can't defeat Germany on our own, which I doubt will occur, but it could very well, if we can't defeat the Germans on our own, then we might have to really revise what we're going to do. The Spanish Civil War, by the way, broken out and is just kind of heavily favoring the fascists, which is good and bad. If we do end up at war with the Axis, nationalist Spain will probably try to stab us in the back, as they're more likely to join the Germans than ourselves, and we don't actually want anyone to join us. So they would probably be a good first target for us to just kind of roll through, test the capabilities of the French military machine, and see just what we're able to achieve. We are, at this point, moving down the industrial sort of focus tree, which will hopefully get our industry up to a decent level so we can have a somewhat respectable military force by the time the war actually does break out. We'll have to see just how well we pull that off. Although I do have a pretty decent level of confidence that we will do at least mediocrely well. Here you see we're going through the three options: basically create our own faction, ally the Italians, or ally Germany. And we'll just see how that ends up going. Getting all of our basic technologies, not really focusing on war technologies now. I do imagine that the main war is going to break out in about 3 years, more or less, just 1940 when it occurred here historically for us, the actual invasion of France and all that. And I do hope that we'll be in a strong position to deal with that when it comes. The Hindenburg makes it, which is pretty great for them. Britain's up to weird stuff, and Japan manages to peacefully get lands from China. So we'll see how well that goes for China in the future. Alright, at any rate though, we are more or less just building up for everything. Same plan as before. Right now we have a few options, basically just with the communists again. We're going to kind of give them ground, but they're losing support compared to the fascists, so it's not as though it really matters. And as fascist support continues to grow in our country, even if the communists are influenced by other countries, if they're not influential in our own country, then it doesn't really matter. Now, one of the reasons we didn't dispute the occupation of the Rhineland was it said it could throw us into a civil war with the communists kind of just supporting peace and trying to rise up against us, which means that the German Reich is now more or less free to just pursue their historical objectives. And since we went to become fascist as opposed to joining the Allies and doing all that, they may end up having a free hand in the East, more or less. We'll see just how well that goes for them and just what ends up happening. We really don't have very much in the way of places we can expand other than Spain. Spain's probably going to be the #1 objective once we do manage to get ourselves fascist, simply because they're a fascist state. Germany is still doing its own thing and probably not strong enough on its feet to intervene. Britain probably won't do anything about that. And other than that, it would be the Low Countries, Belgium and the Netherlands and Luxembourg. However, I do fear that if we tried to intervene against those, that the British, United Kingdom and all that would join against us. And I don't want to fight the UK earlier than we need to for our whole world domination plans. Once we defeat Germany, then we can potentially go to war against the UK and the Allies at large. But we really do need to secure our position as a European powerhouse before we take on the world. And to become a European powerhouse, that means defeating the German Reich, which could use the Italians as our ally, perhaps not. And it looks as though we have the option for, one, it looks like Japan is at war with China now, and two, we can go ahead and have a fascist referendum. We are now Vichy France, which is a little upsetting. I wish that we would have a cooler name than Vichy France, especially since there's no actual reason for the government to move to Vichy, since we still do control Paris and whatnot. At any rate, we are going to justify that war against the nationalist Spanish. Now, here is the great side with that. If anyone does decide to intervene against us into Spain, it is almost certainly going to be the German Reich. Potentially it would be Italy, but I don't really know how likely that is. If it's all three, then we're kind of out of luck, all three being Spain, Italy, and Germany. We might not be able to win that war. However, our best bet, no matter what, would be a rapid invasion of Spain, kick them out of the war as quickly as possible, then redirect all of those units. I do believe we'd be able to hold the Maginot Line against the Germans. The Italian front may shift slightly back, since we probably wouldn't have enough units to defend all of that. At any rate, we're going to send half of our main military force over to the Spanish border, send all of our motorized units and armored units over to the border as well, and just generally begin planning an offensive. So worst case, we fight every fascist nation around us. Best case, we only fight the Spanish, and, you know, basically just do the same plan, only without having to fight on other fronts simultaneously. If we do manage to just defeat the Spanish without ending up having to fight other powers, then we could go on to maybe try to fight the Portuguese. The United Kingdom is doing some Balkan things, which isn't really relevant to us. And depending on how things all pan out, once we defeat the Spanish, we can see if we're capable of defeating the Portuguese, if we're capable of defeating the Belgians, or if we're capable of defeating the Swiss and maybe Italians. What would determine our capability or lack of capability would be if anyone else is going to intervene. As it is, though, nobody is backing the Spanish just yet, although we are getting quite a few events just kind of warning the world that war is about to come. So ideally, we won't have to deal with that. Potentially, though, we may. So it's better to be more prepared than not. We go ahead and still have several of our units training. Hopefully we'll manage to get their training regimes all complete. The war is scheduled to be justified sometime around April. And once that's done, we will just try to invade the Spanish, get a decent sense of the strength of our military, which we'll hopefully find not to be lacking. And we can also hopefully in about 140 days get our final technology slot, so we'll have something like 5. And that'll set us up to be pretty decently well off for late game combat and whatnot. The real threat, once again, is going to be fighting Germany. We'll try to get into a very decent position before that happens. At any rate, we go ahead and set up our offensive line for just all of our regular units. Hopefully they will be able to just get that battle plan all set up. And when we come back tomorrow, it's going to be time to declare this war on the Spanish, at least after a minute or so, and really just find out how lucky we are. Thank you very much for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe. Have a great day.